Thanks for joining us today for episode 126 of Think Big with Michael Zellner, powered by Platinum Jewelers. My guest today, who is so nice to join me for the third time, is the radio voice of the Memphis Grizzlies, Eric Hasseltine. Eric was my first podcast guest a little bit over a year ago. I just started a year ago on June 13th of last year. And I want to start off the podcast by telling everyone just a little bit about the Eric that I've observed personally over the last 7 years or so since I've known him. You know, I met Eric when he had a radio show every Monday through Friday on 92.9 ESPN Radio from 2 to 4 p.m. And I used to have Eric and Gary and Chris and then Jason and John do what are called live commercials. And from my former mattress store, Sleepy Z's, which is out in Bartlett. First, when Eric was moving into his home, he got just about all his furniture and all his mattresses from my store.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, including his patio set, which was the first patio set that I ever sold out of that kiosk that we had that you picked out.
Yeah, still got it.
Oh, cool. It sits out by the
backyard
pool.
right now. Worked out great.
Awesome. You know, I remember making sure to tell my delivery guys, make sure you take extra special care, because when I say Eric got a lot of furniture, he got a ton of furniture. So I was very appreciative of that.
Yeah, it was great.
You know, I tell everyone who asks me, advertising on 92.9 ESPN Radio was, you know, with those guys was the best advertising decision that I ever made. I advertised on other radio stations too, but, you know, I had good results, but not the same as I had on ESPN Radio. That station helped me, you know, more than anything, brand Sleepy Z's, and played a huge part in us winning, you know, Memphis Most Best Mattress Store, you know, 4 years in a row, which I was very proud of the 6 years that I was in business. And I say all this for a reason. And the live spots, you know, we're only supposed to go for, you know, right around a minute or so. You know, Eric went above and beyond his quote unquote duty for me and for Sleepy Z's. And he spent anywhere for at least 2 to 3 minutes talking about the store, his experience there, you know, talking about my wonderful staff. And I was so blessed to have that staff at the time. And he did such a great job for me, and it really helped a lot. So he took great care of me. So I wanted to start off my podcast to let my podcast world to know that voice that you hear on the radio, you know, for broadcasting Grizzly games 82 nights a year, and sometimes obviously days too, is not only amazing at what he does on the radio, but outside of that, he's just a wonderful, genuine guy too. So thank you so much for coming back on today, Eric. I appreciate it. Talk about Grizzlies basketball and recap the season.
Well, no, I'm honored to. And it's, wow, man, 121 podcasts. You've been busy. So, I mean, you're busier than I am in a year. So,
yeah,
no, it was my pleasure. And, you know, it was easy to talk good about a place or speak kindly about a place that always treated me so well. So I loved it. I mean, you know, obviously we've had the discussion of how things can change, but that was one of my favorite spots, and you were always so kind to me. And yeah, I still got a lot of that furniture. Believe me, it's still around. It was a quality stuff. It still is today. So yeah, man, I was happy to do it.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that and everything you did.
Yep.
You know, Eric, even with so many injuries and outside things going on, the Memphis Grizzlies still finished the regular season with, you know, over 50 wins. They're the only team in the Western Conference that has won more than 50 games each of the last 2 seasons. And they did that with, you know, Ja Morant missing 28% of the team's games. What was your expectation this past year going into the season, and what's your overall assessment of how things went for the team?
Well, I thought they took big steps forward, which they did the year before, losing in that series in the semifinals to Golden State Warriors, being the number 2 seed, really learning the fine line of what you have to do to win higher level playoff series than just the first round. They took their first steps losing to Utah a couple seasons ago, and then got by Minnesota. But, you know, truth be told, I don't think they played their best basketball in that Minnesota series, yet they were still able to win 6 games, and then ran into the eventual champion, who honestly, I thought last season, not this past one, the year before in 21-22, really were the more of the number 2 seed overall. But they had injury problems, and the Grizzlies were able to catch them and play from ahead. So they were relatively even. And look, you're talking about series that in game one, Ja Morant is breaking to the basket to win the game, and Klay Thompson made a great step forward defensively that kind of made him change his angle, and he missed the shot to win the game. If he doesn't take that step, I think Ja makes that shot, driving to the bucket. I think there's a seventh game, and who knows? I
Sure.
like to believe the Grizzlies have a great chance to win game 7 after just destroying Golden State in game 5. And so for me, the expectations going into the next year were fairly high. Now, for whatever reason, it's been like this since I've been here. The experts always kind of overlook Memphis. Oh, they're a nice story, but the Lakers, the Clippers, the Suns, who had the big names with Chris Paul, the bigger market teams, the Warriors, they're going to, the Grizzlies will be lucky to be a 7 seed. When you just throw those teams in there, add in Denver, who everybody expected to be very good again, who had gotten fully healthy finally for the first time in 2 years. And a Minnesota team that made splashes. I mean, a lot of people thought the Grizzlies would be right in the play-in mix and possibly not even in the play-in, that they might fall out. So I thought that was undervaluing what they've done in the time that Taylor Jenkins has been the head coach and the front office has been here. I thought that was undervaluing the roster, and I was not surprised to see them come out of the gate well. They were fortunate to have a schedule in the early part of the year that when it was released, I said, okay, you have a chance to build some momentum towards what's going to be a very difficult stretch between Christmas and the All-Star break and tougher road games. And that's by design. The NBA knows the common public sports fan that's not necessarily tied directly to one team, but has a favorite team, isn't a diehard NBA fan going to sit down every night for NBA on TNT and NBA on ESPN and watch their team if they have a local one, or watch whoever's on any night they can. The people that kind of come around when the NFL is starting to wind down, college football is done, and we're just getting into the bowl games. Well, college football is pretty much done around Christmas, except for the Final Four and the playoffs, which are one day and another day. And you get the hype, but in the middle of that, you don't have Thursday night college football. You don't have Saturday days, all through Saturday night college football. You still have Sunday NFL, but think about the teams that around Christmas time know that it's done. It's over. You're not going to be a playoff team. The viewership, the attendance dips a little bit. And that's where the NFL is trying to, keep their listeners and viewers. So it wasn't surprising to me having a superstar that people want to watch and a team that's fun to watch. You see a lot of marquee matchups, a lot of nationally televised games between Christmas and the All-Star break. And you're like, okay, they're not throwing you draft teams, lottery teams. They're throwing you top 5 contenders, and you got to be ready to go. And so I thought that was going to be their real test. The unfortunate thing is in January, after the game where, Ja and Dylan Brooks had the jawing match with Shannon Sharp, Steven Adams, the very next game, gets hurt and never comes back on the floor. Fast forward to after the All-Star break, we were all kind of hoping that Steven Adams would be back. The game in Denver, obviously, we know what happened with Ja after, but that was a big marquee matchup. Everybody was looking forward to it. The Grizzlies played really well, but in the fourth quarter, Denver turned on the Jets, and that's what they do at home. And they're a really good team. And it was an empty feeling leaving the building that night, not only because of the loss, but what got lost in all of the chaos the next day was that Brandon Clark ruptured his Achilles tendon and he was done for the year.
Yeah.
And that was a huge loss for the team. And seeing him in the elevator at the team hotel after the game and basically talking to him and knowing that was the situation even before we got the diagnosis, we knew things were going to be very different. And that without Steven Adams, without Brandon Clark, you had gaping holes in the rotation up front for the things that they do and do so well that are vital to this team. So the expectations at that point were, wow, what can you do? Brandon's not coming back. Is Steven going to make it back for the playoffs? If he doesn't, this goes from there were legitimately people walking up to me in January saying, if you guys don't win the West, I'll be shocked. And my reaction was always the same. Well, ease up a little bit. It's game 42. We still have 40 to go. You never know what can happen. And of course, you never know what can happen happens. So going in, expectations were that I thought they would be a top 5 team. And I always get accused of, oh, you're just a homer. No, I think this team's really good. I think the coaching staff is really good. But I get why you'd say that. But I thought they were a top 5 team. I was hoping for home court advantage in the first round. And they exceeded that. Now, did they put their best foot forward in the postseason? No, but some of that has to do with the Lakers revamping their roster and being better than what your typical play-in tournament team would be. That's a credit to their front office, and some of it has to do with the Grizzlies not being the team that was really not only worthy of the number 2 seed, could have been the number 1 seed. Grizzlies had some games they let slip through their fingertips, and when Denver hit a lull, as every team, even the great ones, will do, you had a chance to pass them. You could have been the number 1 seed, and the Grizzlies just didn't think that was in the cards. I think about 4 weeks out or 5 weeks out, it just kind of seemed like they had kind of resolved their fate. Like, we need to hold off Sacramento to be the number 2 seed, and Golden State and, Dallas and all these other teams that are going to be right there, and Phoenix. And yet there was Denver slipping back, but the Grizzlies were banged up. I have no doubt in my mind that if they had a healthy Steven Adams, they're probably the 1 seed in the West. The playoffs in the first round maybe go differently. Maybe they don't. But, and if you're the 1 seed, it was a smoother path. So with that said, that's not what happened. And you can ifs and nuts and all those things, and, whatever they were, it doesn't, whatever the saying goes, it didn't happen. And right. You can't sit there and say that and look back. So I was proud of the job that they did. The guys that were there and fought through it. I thought Ja went through quite a bit, and obviously there's more to that story now, and it's troubling a little bit. But look, I still love the young guy, and as a player and as a person, he's always been fantastic to me. I think he just made a mistake. Unfortunately, when you're that kind of player and you make a mistake, it's magnified by more times. I mean, he's not a normal 23-year-old, but they're 24-year-old. He's just not. There's nothing anybody can say about that or do about that. So I thought they fought with what they had, and then just kind of by the time it was said and done in Game 6 in LA, they ran out of gas. They just had nothing left, and it was an unfortunate way to bow out. It was a very lopsided afternoon, evening, whatever it was. I can't remember when the game tipped. I want to say it was the night, and just about 7 minutes in, we just went, well, we're now with the realization that this is going to be the end of the year. You're not beating these guys tonight, and that's a credit again to the Lakers and Darvin Ham coming out saying, we do not want to go back to Memphis for Game 7 and put this in their hands. We need to end this thing tonight, and they came out and executed a terrific game plan because of that. But it was a fun year. I mean, all in all, still a fun year. Yes, some disappointments. Yes, some things that everybody's going to point to and be frustrated about. But, look, I've been on both sides of it. You and I both know for a minute there, before our relationship at Sleepy Z's, we used to talk about the days before I was doing the radio show when it was, hey, if we can win 20 games this year, we'll be excited. If we can get 10,000 into the building tonight, we'll be ecstatic. And now it's regular sellouts, a lot more notoriety. We go on trips and people are wearing Grizzlies gear. There's people waiting at the hotels, and it's not only a credit to the players and the coaches, but the front office and the staff there as well. Ticket sales, sponsorship, you name it. They have gotten the name out there, and this is now a pretty big brand in the NBA.
Yeah, you talked about this too. 2 years ago, it was Ja's injury in the second round of the playoffs. It pretty much, not 100%, but it pretty much ended the Grizzlies' championship chances. They lost to Golden State, and then you just talked about Steven Adams, Brandon Clark. Didn't make the championship run impossible, but it certainly did not help. Having those two huge impact players. We know every team has their fair share of injuries, and you just like you said, you don't want to play the what ifs. So there's no guarantees we would have won the series, but having Steven Adams in the middle against Anthony Davis, and and having that explosive Brandon Clark, probably would have made a big difference in that series, right?
I think it makes a huge difference. I think if you go back and look at, Game 1, they came out, and that was also what happened with the Minnesota series. Game 1, they came out and brought the fight to the Grizzlies, which, to be honest, I frankly was disappointed in. I was disappointed that they did not come out with a better foot forward. They had gone through that last year. They knew that this team would be coming for them. And it wasn't LeBron and AD that got them. It was, Rui Hachimura and Austin Reeves.
Right.
But you go and look at the games in LA in games 3 and 4, and I really felt like there were critical moments, especially game 4, where they had a chance. They had the game won, or were ahead with seconds to go. But one of the things that got the Lakers back in was second chance opportunities and dominating in the paint, getting buckets, because the Grizzlies' size had been depleted by 2 of their key rotational guys. It's nothing against Xavier Tillman or Santi Aldama. They played their hearts out, and obviously Jaren Jackson Jr. is the defensive player of the year, but he's one guy. Right. And when you're missing your starting 5 and your backup big who rotates with Jaren and Steven, and they kind of move and shuffle the 3, and then you sprinkle in Santi and Xavier comes in when on a need basis, you're talking about one of the biggest screen setters and best offensive rebounders in the game in Adams, and one of the most explosive 4s in terms of athleticism in Clark, and you don't have either one of them. It's a lot to overcome. It really is. So tough, but that's part of it. You know, this is the NBA, with what people will tell you, there's no babies allowed, none. Right. So that's just kind of how it goes.
You think it maybe was a sort of a bad matchup, considering that the team we had with the Lakers, it was, to have to play them in the first round with, you talked about the revamped team, and plus maybe the extra little motivation that, Dylan gave LeBron too.
Yeah, I thought it was tough. I mean, it's unfortunate. I was watching, so, we have that week off in between the end of the regular season and the start of the playoffs. So I decided to get away from Memphis for a couple of days just to get ready for what I was hoping to be a longer playoff run. And watching Minnesota squander that lead against the Lakers in the play-in tournament game, I went going, okay, this could really work out. We'll be back in Minneapolis. Timberwolves are playing great. It'll be a tough matchup. Watching the way the Lakers came back, I went, this is not the matchup you really want. I mean, you respect anybody in the playoffs, but the size, the notoriety, all eyes being on it. And look, I think it'd be unfair to sit here and praise the team and not talk about their shortcomings. They got a little cocky. They got a little cocky during the season. They got a little arrogant. They got a little full of themselves in terms of what their abilities were. So I didn't like it. I mean, I would have liked to have seen Minnesota in that game, but it's a bold strategy to go 12 minutes and make one basket and try to win a game, and that's what they did, and it didn't work. Turns out it's not one you probably want to employ as an NBA team, but give the Lakers defense some credit. They locked up and really got going in that game. So, yeah, it was a tough matchup. We saw that when it was all lined up, and the thing that scared me most was right after the Minnesota game, one of the reporters asked LeBron, they said, well, have you thought about Memphis? And he spent about 2.5 minutes rattling off accomplishments, what players did, what they had done before the NBA. He talked about Luke Kennard and him and the all-time leading scorers of Ohio high school basketball. And I went, wow, this dude is locked in. And I have a lot of respect for him. I mean, he's chased down the all-time leading scorer. He's going to be the only player, I think, in history, unless someone comes along with his same type of body size and same type of longevity, that's going to have 40,000 points, 10,000 rebounds, and 10,000 assists. No one else will ever do that. Somebody might score 40,000 again, and somebody might get 40,000 and 10,000 rebounds, or maybe 40,000 and 10,000 assists. But all three of them, that's awfully tough. Right. And this is a guy, and, look, I get how Dylan likes to fire himself up, but this is the guy that loves that guy talking about him too. And so he was out to prove something to them. He had a little something stuck in his mind from not this season here, but the previous season. The Grizzlies were in LA. There was some talking going on, and LeBron did not take kindly to the young guys kind of giving them the business as a team and letting them know that we're the young guys and we're coming for you. He held on to that, and I could tell that. So yeah, I was a little nervous about that.
Absolutely. Desmond Bane was selected the number 30 pick in the first round of the 2020 draft.
Yeah,
out of TCU by the Celtics, and he ended up getting traded to the Grizzlies for a future pick. Wow, that was just amazing pickup. He ended up getting
Yeah,
selected.
that was actually preordained. So they knew that was happening. A lot of people will kill Boston for that move, but that was a
Right.
deal that was in place before
Oh,
it
it
all
was
went down.
okay. I never
Yeah,
knew that.
and the Grizzlies were after Dez, and they called Boston, and Boston really didn't have somebody on their board. Sure, they would love to have Dez on their board, but with their roster, he wouldn't. It's crazy because everybody goes back and looks at the Draymond Green year, and the Grizzlies liked him, but they picked somebody else, and I believe it was Tony Roden Jr. And everybody says, "Oh, you should have just taken Draymond Green." I don't think Draymond Green's the same Draymond Green that he is in Golden State if he plays in Memphis.
Sure.
I think sometimes it's players later in drafts finding the fit of what team works best for them. For Desmond Bane, this was the ideal situation. He had another guy there with him in Grayson Allen where he could just step in, make some mistakes, and if he wasn't playing particularly well or the moment might seem too big for Taylor Jenkins to have him in there, he's on the bench, and he's okay with that. So what do? They realize this is the guy we're hitching the wagon to. So we're going to trade Grayson Allen for essentially a player that you hope maybe can help you out in Sam Merrill, but who's a tremendous shooter. But Dez was going to get the majority of the minutes. It was Dez's job. He's the starter. That's our guy. That's who we're rolling with. Thank you, Grayson. Here's an opportunity for you to go to another good team. But this is what we're doing. We want this guy on the floor 30 to 32 minutes. And that's what they did. So,
in just a few short years, the guy's, turned into an incredible player. He's already, in my opinion, a superstar. Tell him, the audience, what you think about where his career is headed over the next few years.
Man, sky's the limit. We have great shooters in this league that really help teams go to the next level. And I think that's where he fits in. For him, the development of driving it more to the basket, not just being a specialty player, learning how to play better NBA defense, attacking the rim. He's got it. I mean, he's got everything. Now, unfortunately, again, with the injury bug, he gets a toe injury that kind of lingers before the toe injury. And also, granted, before Jaren came back fully healthy, he's scoring 24, 25 a game.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what some teams' leading scorers aspire to. And he's your second option behind Ja Morant. But with the way Ja Morant can break down defenses with dribble penetration, the way you have to focus attention to Jaren, I mean, I would hate to draw if they're fully healthy and they have Adams in the lineup and they have those other three and, pick whoever they're going to roll with at the replacement piece for Dylan Brooks, whether that's on the roster now or somebody they try to acquire in the offseason. I wouldn't want to try to draw up a defense against these guys because if you focus your attention on taking away Ja, he's just going to make passes to everybody else. If you focus your attention on trying to double the post and Jaren or double when he drives off dribble penetration, everything's open. But if you leave him wide open from three, he can burn you. If you run out at Desmond Bane on the three-point line, he can blow by you with a dribble move. Or if you try to kind of combine him with two defenders, he's a good passer as well. So it's, again, pick your poison. And it's not something I would envy any coach having to do. So I think the sky's the limit for the young man. I really felt like he was on an all-star pace before that toe injury. I thought the Grizzlies had a chance at not one, not two, possibly three all-stars. The way they were playing, the way Desmond was playing, the points they were scoring, the way they were beating teams and beating them handily with him and then without him, they were leaving no doubt. And a lot of people felt like they were the best team in the first 30, 35 games of the season, along with the Boston Celtics. And I don't think they were wrong. But injuries, things that happen off the court, that changes your complexion very quickly. So valuable lesson for a young team to learn that it's not an assumption because you're the best, you'll be the last one standing. If you're the best, you almost have to, as I tell my son this when he plays baseball, now that you're on a good team, you have to work twice as hard. Just because you made it to a good team doesn't mean that you can now just, sit your feet up, eat Cheetos and watch television. Now you got to put in an extra, couple hours a week. How you break it up is up to you, but you got to take a few extra swings in the cage. You got to take a few extra ground balls, throw a couple extra pitches after practice. Once you get to a level, you can't just relax. And I think that a lot of young teams get caught doing that. Maybe the Grizzlies did a little bit too. And you learn the lesson the hard way. And that's a bitter pill. I mean, I didn't even put a jersey on And I can tell you, there are nights where I'm still sitting around going, man, that was so close to everything we hoped for, and yet so far away.
Right.
And it was beyond close. I mean, you could see that brass ring, as the saying goes, right in front of us. When we hit the All-Star break, you're going, okay, you're looking at the schedule. You're counting up, do you win this one? Do you not? Everybody does that. You look at the rosters, you look at the teams, and you're going, well, by my count, this very well could be the record. And I always try to do it conservatively and take into account sometimes things experts don't, like travel plans and 3 games and 4 nights, and how far the flights are and when we're going to be there. What's the weather like? Where are we staying? Those types of things. What's the other team look like if they're playing a weaker part of their schedule? Are they building confidence and getting ready for a big showdown for them? So I had this team maybe a few games ahead of where they finished because of the injuries, but in the end, I'm watching it, and the West was just beating up on each other.
Right.
That was finally we all kind of agreed it's a war of attrition when you're in the Western Conference. Who can stay healthy? Who's going to win the critical matchups between the two? What teams are going to pull the plug and give up on, a thought of a championship because it's too tough. Whereas in the East, it was better this year. And obviously we saw an 8 seed come out of there, but Milwaukee and Boston were the dominant teams. And then you had Philly. Those were the dominant 3 teams. Then there was Cleveland and New York, and they were good, but I don't think anybody truly believed they were going to win the East, those 2 teams. People liked their stories, and they were great stories. J.B. Bickerstaff did a phenomenal job with the Cavs, and Tom Thibodeau did a great job with the New York Knicks. But I don't think anybody in their right mind thought, yeah, they'll get out of the first round, whoever beats the other, and they'll go knock off Milwaukee, or they'll go knock off Boston, or they'll go knock off Philly. Everybody was like, they're going to get the second round, and whoever the 1 seed is, if it's Milwaukee will hand them their lunch and move on to the Eastern Conference Finals. What you didn't want to be was, 2 or 3 in the East, because if you're 2 or 3 especially, then you're playing a really high-level team in the second round, except for one thing. Somebody forgot to let Miami know all of that, and they came in and upset Milwaukee, and then moves on into the next round and moves past Boston, and they go win. They win the whole. They win the whole Eastern Conference side, and that's amazing. They they move past Boston in the finals. They move past New York, and we had all this great Cinderella story going on, and you're going like, wow, this is amazing. This was something somebody told me, and I found it fascinating. Second round of the NBA players this year, playoffs. You had a 1 seed in the West, which was the Denver Nuggets. You had a 2 seed in the East, which was Boston. You had a 3 seed in the East, which was Philadelphia. You had a 4 seed in the West, which was the Phoenix Suns. A 5 seed in the East, the New York Knicks. There was a 6 seed coming out, and I'm trying to remember which one it was. Whoever upset. The Lakers were the 7, and Miami was the 8. So whoever else was the other one. You had 1 of each seeds in each one of them. Wow. And I thought that was, just phenomenal. Denver and the Lakers square off in the finals after the Lakers end up upsetting, the Grizzlies, and then knock off their next opponent. And I'm trying to remember who they had in that second round, but Golden State. And Golden State came in there, and again, it's just so balanced and competitive. I don't think we'll ever see that again, where you have 1 of each seed in the final 8, one of each. Usually you had 2 1s or 2 2s. That was remarkable. But that said to me how competitive the league was this year.
Are you shopping for a new watch, an engagement ring, any kind of jewelry at all? What's up, Memphis? This is Jaren Jackson Jr. from the Grizzlies, encouraging you all to shop where I shop, Platinum Jewelers here in Memphis. Platinum Jewelers has a big selection of earrings, stockable rings, luxury watches, necklaces, bracelets, really whenever you need. 9387 Poplar next to Fresh Market in Germantown. So if you need anything jewelry related, go to my spot, Platinum Jewelers.
And amazing how the Grizzlies were so good. I mean, winning 51 games with all the injuries, the missed games by Jaren, the missed games by Ja, Brandon, Steven. I mean, gosh, you're right. They easily, you're healthy. And I know that's a lot to ask for in NBA. You're a 60-win team, possibly.
Right. I mean, it's just, it really does go back to, you're like, how did this even happen? Like, what happened here? Sacramento was the 3 seed, and Mike Brown undoubtedly deserved to win Coach of the Year, and they were a young team. They got their lumps. Everybody's like, oh man, look at the 2 and the 3 in the West and the draws they got. Nobody was a fan of it for anybody because they were tough. And so, Phoenix goes out and gets Kevin Durant, but Denver proves to them, hey, look, we're going to do it as a team with the guys we already had. So, and then Denver rolls through the Lakers, and we see Miami and Boston. Thankfully, Boston won a couple of games and kind of pushed Miami to Game 7, and everybody thought this might be the first time we ever see a 3-0 deficit erased in a series win. And all Miami did was say, here, hold our beer collectively while we go to Boston and just destroy them in Game 7, which was remarkable to me. I mean, again, that's one of the most remarkable things about this season is you had a team that was clearly thought we're going to get wiped out by the national pundits in the conference finals. At least people were giving the Lakers a chance. People were saying about Miami, like, look, it's a great story, but you're talking about the Celtics, probably the most balanced team in the NBA along with the Nuggets. This isn't the same deal. And Jimmy Butler and company just jump out to a 3-0 lead. Then everybody's like, oh, what's wrong with the Celtics? All of a sudden it's 3-3, and the talk immediately a week after burying the Celtics is they're going to be the first team to do it. The Red Sox did it. It happened to the Bruins. Boston is the 3-0 city where it always happens. And all Miami does is just go up there and say, you guys just get ready for your golf tournament. We're going to hand you a very lopsided loss. Now, there was an injury in the beginning of the game to the Celtics, and that affected the game. But they got themselves in that position by not taking care of what they needed to take care of. And that more of a testament to me to how well Miami played than to Boston. And you go back to the Grizzlies, like you said, they played so well. But unfortunately, in the war of attrition, they lost. Yep. They lost their center. They lost their backup 4. Their point guard had things going on off the court that are a distraction. And the other thing they lost to me that I don't think got talked about enough was Zaire Williams really played well his rookie year. And I will never forget, because this was such a quick turnaround for him. We had our first preseason game of this year in Milwaukee, and we're up there, and it was beautiful time of year up there. One of the assistant coaches and I, Brad Jones, and the head coach of the Memphis Hustle are just talking, laughing. We go to a Brewers game. So, at a baseball game, you're just talking shop. We had kind of space to ourselves. And I said, obviously tomorrow the main guys are going to sit for both teams. I said, I'm really anxious to see how Zaire handles being the guy. Like, he's going to be the guy in this game. And they're like, wait till you see him, because he had just killed it all summer. And it was clear, Michael, that night, the best player on the court for both teams was Zaire Williams.
Wow.
And we didn't see him again for 2.5 months. Something tweaked in his knee. He had some tendonitis. He had grown a little bit. And when he came back and couldn't get into a groove offensively, he just didn't know what to do. And you could see it wearing on him mentally, to the point where we all, on the broadcasting side, love the young man. He's great. I mean, phenomenal dude. So easy to talk to his parents. You just want to go hug him and go, yo, man, you'll get it. Everybody goes through this. And after a game, you can just see him just like it consuming him. And sometimes you just want to go, hey, we have 82 of these things. If you let one eat you up, it consumes you for more than just tonight. The next one, you're not going to think it's consuming you, but it is. When that clock hits 0 and you've answered the questions post-game and you've taken your shower and you've gotten your treatment, you've gotten your dinner or whatever you're doing, it's done. Drop it at the door. But being young and caring as much as these guys do, I totally get it.
Right.
I totally get it. But, with that comes maturity. And that's where you see great teams. And the reason teams can be great is they can get their lunch handed to them by 40 and the next night come out and look like world champions and hand somebody else their lunch because they're not thinking about the night before. A young team gets their lunch handed to them like that. Sometimes they come back and it starts to skid and steamroll. So I think that's a big step for them this year that we'll see. They're a very resilient group already, but there's another level of resiliency they can get to.
Brad Carson is the operation brand manager for Odyssey Memphis Sports, won
Mhm.
numerous awards over his career for his work in
He
9290.
paid the judges for those awards. Let's be honest here. Carson is that guy that you go into an award ceremony, you better expect to lose because he's over there glad handing and telling everybody how great they are. Brad's a great guy. I'm kidding. I'm just
I
giving
know
him
you are. I asked him to tell me a little bit about you, and he said this quote, Eric has always been the most electric play-by-play man in the league. I love listening to his calls, and the listeners continue to say it every season. As a host with us and now continuing through the Grizzlies radio network and his guest appearances on 92.9, Eric's always has those intricate stories that give the fans and listeners and insiders perspective as someone who travels with the team, knows behind the scenes stories and the relationships around the NBA. We're lucky to have him in Memphis, unquote. Tell us a little bit about the Brad you know.
Oh, it's a hard position to be in. And I was very surprised when I first went there that not only does he have to program the station and deal with four very different individuals when we had our lineup, when it was me, just dealing with me and Gary, I don't want this to sound arrogant or contrite. I'm kind of the easiest one to handle because you can just turn me loose. I'm going to do my thing. Sometimes that can be more difficult for a program director because when you turn me loose, I'm going to do my thing. And maybe that's not their thing. But I've been in the business for so long. We had guys that had come from other ranges before we got Chris. So Gary had come as a reporter and got on the radio, and his personality just beams through. He's one of the most talented hosts I've ever seen. So when it was just me and Gary, it's pretty easy to run the station. Flip on the national feed, and then at 1:00 I came on and Gary came on at 4, and we had 6 hours of 5 hours of local programming, and we were done. When we were able to land Jeff Calkins and Chris Vernon, and I want to say Calkins came first, I'm pretty sure he did, and then Vernon came right after, and Chris wanted 3 hours, and they asked me if I was okay with it. I was like, if we can get Chris out, he can have one of my hours, absolutely. If you give us a lineup of Jeff Calkins, Chris Vernon, myself, and Gary Parrish, I become like the weak link, in my opinion. Those three guys are so talented. But what I liked about it was the different areas. Jeff is a jack of all trades, phenomenal columnist who is brilliant. He went to Harvard and was an attorney and decided to get into sports. Chris, right. I had the pleasure of working with as a partner when I was first here. When I first started, I was not his partner. We did a show together for a while, and then after we both left our first landing spot in Memphis, he went to another station, and I was on his show twice a week regularly. That dude is a different cat when it comes to preparation. He has single-handedly kept the Mead Spiral Notebook Company in business, I believe, because he would come in and there's just pages and pages for one show. And I'm like, yo, dude, are those like 10 pages all for this 2-hour show? Yeah. How you going to get all that in there? That's a lot. I just write stuff down, and I don't even know if I use it. I actually went to his house before he married his lovely wife and had 2 beautiful kids when he was moving, and he was in an apartment, and there was these stacks of notebooks. I'm like, you keep them? He goes, yeah, because if I ever had a guest on, I kind of take notes. I leave a blank space. He goes, what do you do? And I said, I leave the station and go sit in my couch and watch Sports Center and just kind of remember. He goes, well, I don't have that kind of memory. And I was always blessed with that. I would have bosses that would yell at me like, you never prepare. And I'm like, what do you think I did all last night and all this morning? Right. Well, where's your notebook? I don't write it down. I get it up here. I give myself an outline, which is 1 page each day. And I'll say, okay, this is where we want to go. And I'll leave a blank space and fill in bullet points if I need to. And then you had Gary. And so to manage that group of talent is what I'm getting to. It was tough. And on top of that, he's producing Gary's show, which was a highly rated sports talk show. So I have a lot of respect for that. Our professional opinions didn't always go together, but we always worked through that in a way. And when I left, in all honesty, it was time for me to go, not because of anything, but it was time for me to go. I had thought about it and I'd been on a show in one form or another. And, that was tough. It was hard to leave, but there were some things in my personal life that I wanted to pay more attention to. And it was just a chunk of time. So being able to do that, and, it like with any relationship. So this is what I'm getting to, is like with any relationship, usually is not ending on the best of terms, but it's how you recover from that to me matters. So as I was leaving, yes, Brad and I butt heads a little bit. And I don't really tell that story, because what mattered to me was, after we butt heads and I needed some cooling down, he approached me and said, "Hey, look, I just want to apologize and say I should have apologized earlier, but I knew you were still angry." And in his defense, I was still hurting from the loss of my father. Yeah. And at that time, I didn't have a great way of keeping my tongue. And as an employee, I said some things I look back on now and I regret, because it's not how you should talk to people that have earned their opportunity to be ahead of you. But at that time, I was, again, flustered with other things, and we all make that mistake of letting things get in. Do. But Brad owned it and talked to me, and every time I see him, has always wished me all the best. I wish him all the best. I tell people all this all the time. For being able to run that radio station, the successes he had, to me, as a husband and father, he is an incredible role model for what people should be. His lovely wife and their son, Jake, they have such a great family, and they're such wonderful people outside of an industry that you deal with a lot of not wonderful people in a lot of not wonderful situations. And, look, Memphis lucky to have him too. That station, there's a reason guys have left. And I don't mean this disparagingly to the guys that are still there. I would have taken that lineup of those four guys, and you could stack it up, in my opinion, against any sports talk station in the country. And I don't think there's a clear cut, they're better than you. And I think there is a clear cut, we were better than a lot, because I would listen on the road, and I would tell, we're market 50. I've been in market 3 and listened to some of these guys on the radio, and they're good, but we're better. Right. I thought we were better. And that was evident. They've been nominated for multiple Marconi Awards, which is like a radio station's Academy Award, as best sports talk station in the country. Nobody outside the top 10 markets usually ever gets nominated. Usually you're talking Boston, Philly, sometimes St. Louis, but because they're good and they love baseball and hockey, and they get great sports talk there. But usually it's Philly, Boston, San Francisco. You'll mix in a New York. We were in there, and I've heard many people say it's a travesty you guys didn't win. The year that one of the last years I was there and we got our first nomination, I talked to people in the industry, and they said it's an absolute travesty you guys did not win. Your station, top to bottom, and the way you program, in our opinion, as professionals, is second to none. And that's a lot of Brad. It's a lot of Brad there for sure.
Jaren Jackson Jr. deservedly won the NBA Defensive Player of the Year this season. 3 blocks a game, 7 rebounds, still averaged almost 19 points on the offensive end. And, I remember back when he was drafted as the 4th pick in 2018, there were several skeptical people like, why are we picking this guy, out of Michigan State? Mm-hmm. I would easily say he has shut them all up. What's your assessment of his game and the impact he's made on the team?
Scratching the surface, same like Desmond, just getting rolling. These guys, that's the scary thing with this team. This is one of the youngest rosters in the league, and that included at the start of the year with Danny Green. They traded Danny away. Steven was 29. Other than that, there were no 30-year-olds on the roster. Right. That's an anomaly in the NBA. And so when you're talking about a guy that in his rookie year was not really as banged up as people made it seem. He did sit the final, I think, like 18, 20 games. That was more because the script had been written. The Grizzlies were not going to make the playoffs, and he had some lingering things they wanted to get rid of. And they needed to see guys who were going to be part of it, because they were about to go through a potentially massive rebuild. They got very lucky, got the number 2 pick, settled on a kid out of Murray State who turned out to be pretty good. And they had a nice 1-2 punch. If you go back to that year, and go back and remember that Tyus Jones was out when the Grizzlies got to the bubble after the shutdown. The way they were playing before the shutdown, they were going to make the playoffs, in my opinion. We were on a road trip that started in Portland and was going to go through San Antonio and to New Orleans. We were going to see 3 teams that if we went 2-1 on that trip, I said, none of these guys are catching us. It's not happening. And the way they were playing, I felt really good. Now they had just lost the night before a game they let slip through their fingers. But the attitude on that plane flight out there with a young team was remarkable to me. They were locked in. They were, I can say it because it's a podcast, they were pissed off that they lost at home to Orlando the previous game, who turned out to be a pretty good team. They ended up actually challenging and trying to get into the playoffs themselves. They weren't great, but they were better, I thought, than their record showed. Jaren gets hurt in the bubble. It tears his knee. And you're just like, oh, my gosh. He had a game in the bubble where he almost went for 50. And you're going, okay, it's starting to click. Well, now he's got to take a year to rehab. He comes back towards the end of that year. And no coincidence, he plays 78 games. The Grizzlies are the number 2 seed, knock off Minnesota, and then lose to Golden State. And then he's working out in a stress fracture in the foot. And he's got to have that taken care of. So he's going to miss 20 games. He's, by all accounts, way ahead of schedule. And everybody's just like, yo, this is how valuable this guy is. We can't have him come back too soon and have this linger. We'll take a couple losses if we need to make sure it's right. Well, Jaren's telling them it's right. Let me at it. And when he came back, the team's defense was towards the bottom. And when it finished, it was right at the top. And he's a big reason why. When he is on the floor, they are a better basketball team. And the thing that got me with him this year, it finally clicked offensively for him. He loves to, all players love to shoot 3-point shots. That's the way the game's played. And he would drive at people. And Elliot Perry would say it, Brevin Knight, who are on our broadcast. I wish he would just square guys up and let the threes feed off that. And he did that. And look, you got 3 guys capable of giving you 30 any given night. I remember we were lucky if we had 3 games where guys scored 30 points because the style was different. Now we can have multiple guys. It would not shock me if there's 8 to 10 games next year where all 3 of those guys are 25 or more when they're healthy, when they're all together on the floor and everything's clicking, as Taylor would say, as the head coach, when everybody's eating. And Jaren's a big reason why. And his defense is phenomenal. People are like, oh, the naysayers was like, he's a shot block hunter. He's just looking for a block. No, that's just how he is. Right. It's so amazing to me to watch guys. They'll get a step on a guy. They think they got an easy basket. And absolutely out of nowhere, Jaren will block the shot. And everybody's looking around going, where did he come from? His instincts defensively are phenomenal. I remember that draft night. And that was the night where no one was sure what was going to happen after DeAndre Ayton. Suns had settled on Ayton. Where was Sacramento going to go? Were they going to go with Luka Doncic? Were they going to take Marvin Bagley? Were they going to take Trae Young? Were they going to take Jaren Jackson? You had 4 guys, toss them up. That's 2 through 5. Kings settle on Bagley. Atlanta's 3. Atlanta says, hey, if you'll ship us a future first, we'll take Luka to Dallas. You take Trae Young with a first, and we'll make the swap. As much as they liked Luka, they thought Trae Young and a first-round pick for Luka Doncic was going to work in our favor. Turns out it works in Dallas's favor, too, because the guy's a stud. We were all shocked Sacramento didn't take Luka Doncic, but they were, well, we have De'Aaron Fox, who turned out to be pretty good, too. And then you were left with a decision. A lot of people said, well, why didn't the Grizzlies then just take Trae Young if they wanted Luka Doncic and grab him and not do that? They didn't have a first-round draft pick to trade. They had already traded their pick from the next year, and Atlanta wanted it right away. They didn't want to wait. And you can't trade picks in multiple years back to back. So because of the conditions, if the Grizzlies were going to try to do that and block that trade and get in on it themselves, the first round pick was going to come to Atlanta in their eyes too late. So as much as at the time it seemed like Jaren was not really an option, he didn't really work out here. And people got the misnomer that he had told them, I'm not working out for you, because he just flat out refused to play. He just thought didn't think he would be on the board. Right. He thought he would go 1, 2, or 3, and that's what all things were pointing to. And truth be told, I don't blame him. Workouts do nothing. If you don't know that you want that guy, if he's there at 4, by that time, then your scouts haven't done their homework. So why go work out? Why go onto a court? Why, sure, you want to go show him what you're capable of. But it's a game of basketball, and you land the wrong way, and all of a sudden you did a workout that isn't really there to enhance where you're going. You know you're going top 5. I roll an ankle and I can't play for 8 to 12 weeks, or I break a bone, and that can change your financial future.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of these guys started skipping these things. When they took him, and we had our conference call with him, I'll never forget his line saying, we're all in the back with all the media reporters and everybody's got their questions. And he kind of jumped and he says, hey, look, my offense will be there because someone asked about something. Because my goal is to be known as, if not the best, one of the top 3 defensive players in this game. My offense will find itself. I will develop into that. But if I can impact our team positively as a defender that people have to scheme against, that's my goal. Well, let me tell you what, buddy, goal achieved, because teams want no part of him. Right. They know it. They've seen it. We were shocked he wasn't in the top 3 last year, where he had more steals and blocks combined than anybody. He didn't lead the league in block shots per game. And this year, from the day he set foot on the court, his first game, he blocked 4 shots. And it was perfect. And the timing's even better. He is doing things that just don't happen as much anymore. And it's not just block shots. He gets hands on passes. He helps on double teams, things that don't show up, alters shots. Guys get breakaways, he'll run them down. Guys get steps into the lane, he'll step in, and instead of taking an open 10-footer, they're forced to pass. That doesn't show up on a stat sheet. What does is the metrics of when he's on the floor and when he's not. And when he's on the floor, the Grizzlies are a very, very good defensive team, elite defensive team. When he's not, they're solid, but it's not the same. And he can't play 48 minutes,
right?
But games he got into foul trouble, and that was a big problem early for him. When he stopped that, the team got even better. So that's why I really like this team still moving forward with all the things that are happening. Their system, their defensive game plan, the players they have, they're about to really hit their stride, in my opinion, when you hit year 5, 6, 7 in the NBA. Let's not forget, Steph Curry didn't win a title until he had been in the league for 5 or 6 or 7 years. Yeah. LeBron James did not win a title until he went to Miami, and he had been in the league 6 or 7 years. You don't just walk in and as the star player be a rookie. You've got to learn. Jason Tatum's young, but he's been in the league for a good amount of time. They got to the finals. They still haven't won a championship. Giannis took time to win a championship. All these teams go back and look. Jordan was another great one. They had to get through Detroit. Yep. They had to learn to get by Cleveland. Then they had to learn to get by Detroit. Then they did, and there you go. But it was for everybody. But people just have this misnomer because of the way when the league changed and got to where people were watching. Here are 2 rookies in Magic Johnson and Larry Bird that are lighting the league up and playing at a different level, except for one factor. Remember, one of those guys wasn't in the finals that year, and it was Larry Bird. And that made him angry to no end. It's a different time. Rookies just don't come and do that. If people think Victor Wembanyama coming into San Antonio means the Spurs will be in the NBA Finals, the kid's a tremendous prospect. You got another thought coming. You're going to have to surround him with a bunch. And it's just normally not like that.
Magic Johnson, I believe that when he get the finals, he played center against Philadelphia.
Final game against Philly, yeah. As a Sixer fan, I'm really happy you brought that up. And by happy, I mean like I'm ready to throw something in my house. Because I was heartbroken as an 8-year-old at that time. But
yeah, I was a big Dr. J fan.
I was Doctor was my guy.
Daryl Dawkins.
And that was the thing. You had one of the 3 if you were just a common fan. And I had the Golden State Warriors by where I lived, but they weren't great. They had some guys I liked, but I was asked recently on a podcast, rank your top 10 NBA finals. I put that one in my top 3. Can't remember where I had it. I didn't have it number 1, but it was up there because to step over there as a rookie and all of the hype and all the things, and we all saw it now with that series winning time, all the things they went through that year. Their head coach took a header off a bike and did not return. That was the assistant, and Pat Riley hopped off the broadcast, went over there and helped out as the assistant. And that wasn't a day where you had 5, 6 assistants. That wasn't a day where you were flying charter flights. Those were commercial flights. The league was very different. And these guys dealt with all of that internal turmoil of now we have this rookie, but we have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was awesome at the time. But here comes this rookie and this other guy that's unknown, Michael Cooper, and they take minutes from veterans. that locker room at times, as people have said, was not the happiest of places. So to me, what he did and put the team on his shoulders as a rookie in that game and scored, I think, 42 and won the MVP says a lot about what a player can do. That is an incredibly rare story.
In your opinion, Eric, does Memphis have their own version of the NBA, what others like to call the big three with Ja, Desmond, and Jaren now?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, it's funny. Dylan wanted to make it Dylan, Jaren, and Ja at one point. And I liked the thought. I just didn't think that that's where the team needed to focus. To me, a big three, the original one to me was, that where we called it the big three. Because if you go back and look at, the Bulls had a big three. It was Michael and Scotty and either Horace Grant or Michael and Scotty and Dennis Rodman. And the Rockets had three guys. They had, Hakeem and Clyde and take your pick of who you wanted to be the third, but they had other guys scoring like that. They weren't as prevalent. The Lakers' big three was Worthy and Magic and Kareem. The Celtics' big three was Bird and McHale and Dennis Johnson. To me, as good as Robert Parrish was Dennis Johnson with his ability to play both ends of the floor. Pistons, in those years, it was Dumars and Isaiah Thomas and Bill Laimbeer. They had their version of when guys are sending three guys to the All-Star game every year, teams that are awesome, that's a big three. The one that really kind of turned the attention to me was Boston, because what you had were three guys from different places. Those other ones were all pretty homegrown. And that's why I don't really equate it like that, because it's hard to do it homegrown, because that means you have to be bad enough to draft guys or do really good things in the draft. San Antonio is the best one to me. They drafted Duncan because they were bad. They drafted Tony Parker because they were smart. And they were even smarter when they took some kid out of Argentina named Manu Ginobili, who people still couldn't pronounce his name as he got better. Those were homegrown. Boston was open the checkbook. Kevin Garnett saying, I'll come play for you if you get Ray Allen. I'd love to play with Paul Pierce, but I need Ray Allen. And all three of them had to say, we've been the 26 point per game guy. We now want to be the guy standing on the podium sliding a ring onto our right hand. So we'll take a step back. It's Paul's team. And that's a big step. So that's hard to do. The Heat, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh said the same thing. LeBron's the man. We'll get ours. Bosh, I will never forget this. Somebody made a video. Bosh coming in. And again, it was go get it in free agency. Bosh was 26 and 12 and 12. And they made this video, and these was two guys in an office. And they said, when things aren't working right, or they're just kind of broken and they don't fit what we're doing, we call it a Bosh. Hey, this stapler's broken. It's a Bosh. Hey, this refrigerator needs repairs. It's a Bosh. And I'm like, yo, dude, that guy's giving you 18 and 9 and an all-star. How many points you want him to score when LeBron's dropping 30, Wade's dropping 25? He gives you 18, and the three of them together, if they all focus all their attention on the other two guys, he'll give you 30. But he stood back and took it, accepted the role, and said, I want to win. And they did. So I think you do have it. It's three guys that have grown up together. I think that's a big factor. And I think you have a three-player trio that on any given night, one of them gives you 35 plus. Another one does something to help you win in one way or another. If it's Ja, it can be assist. If it's Jaren, it can be blocks and rebounds. If it's Dez, it can be better defense than people expect and clutch free throws. They don't have to be 30 plus points going into the fourth, having dominated to be in a good position. They could be 6 or 7 points, and any one of those guys could erupt for a 10-0 personal run. All of a sudden, you look up, they got 18 points, and you're blowing a team out because now you focused your attention. And that, to me, is why I like this team so much, is you watch them on any given night, and it's seeming like every 5 minutes somebody gets their run. Somebody gets hot. When they're on their game, every 5 minutes, and then it'll switch. Ja will score 22 points in the third quarter, and in the fourth, take 2 shots because Darren or Dez or Jaren have it going, or somebody else. And he's willing to go, okay, if you got it going now, you score. Let's go get this W. And that's where it will be. And so, yeah, if they keep these three guys together long term, which I think that's the plan, you're going to look back and say that was one of the best trios of that generation for sure.
There have been rumors about our awesome backup point guard, Tyus Jones being
Yeah.
traded in the offseason because obviously he's good enough to start for so many teams. Do you
Mm-hmm.
think that should still happen now, now that we don't have Ja for the first 25 games?
Well, I think it's hard to say should it happen because we're not in the war room knowing what there is, and you have a guy who's your really truly your one marketable trade commodity. He's got 1 year left on his deal. He's a starter. He's good enough to be a starter. He's on second. He's not backup point guard money. It's higher, but it's not high level point guard money either. And that's a bargain. And so a team that needs that and has assets in places you have, who knows what the offer is. I never say like nobody's off the market. Make your offer. If your offer is ridiculous, don't be shocked if I laugh at you.
Right.
Because it's silly. But if your offer is good, the one thing I've always believed, and I think it's held true throughout the league, you never want to be the guy that gives up the best player, even for multiple players. You look at some of these trades where a star guy gets traded for 2, 3, 4 guys. Usually the team that got the star guy wins that trade, but it's not always the case. Denver won, even though the Knicks won by getting Carmelo Anthony. The haul in return for the Nuggets, the way they basically said, if you're going to do this, you're going to reshape our future. That Nuggets team was really good. Carmelo Anthony was really good at the time. But that Nuggets team got Danilo Gallinari. They got Raymond Felton. They got Timofey Mozgov. They got all these guys. All of a sudden, they went from a non-playoff team or a borderline playoff team with Melo, even though they had a couple good runs with them. And Melo took them to the Western Conference Finals, I believe, once. But they were starting to peter back towards the middle. They went and you were like, you got your hands full when you play that young group. And they had a chance to rebuild it that way. And so I don't have a problem hearing the rumors. Knowing the front office, the way they're meticulous about everything, that offer is going to have to look really, really sweet for them to go, yeah, we're fine trading away a guy that has basically been one of our catalysts for 2 seasons, now 3 seasons.
Right. And we're recording this, the night before the NBA draft. Of course, it depends on who's available.
Right.
The Grizzlies, they could end up having that
That's
25th pick. Right. Or they could end up trading Tyus Jones and getting a higher pick. Do
you move up? Yeah. Brooklyn's got, the 21 and 22, and they've talked that Brooklyn's very interested. Is somebody in there, that has multiple high picks and needs a true point guard? Who knows? But it does appear, I don't know that you'll see many outside the top. First of all, outside the top 3, I doubt any of these guys aren't where we project them to be. Now, obviously, we know Victor Wembanyama is going to go number 1, and we know that the next 2 more than likely could be Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson. Where they go is there, but who knows? There's other young guys there too. You're dealing with 19-year-old guys. Wembanyama is a game-changing franchise player, but if people think he's just going to walk into the league and score 35 and grab 13 rebounds and use that 7'5", 210-pound frame, or 7'3", whatever he measured out at, he's 215 pounds. Jaren Jackson Jr. is 250. Steven Adams, 275. Run into that screen once and find out what this league's about. Is he capable of getting bigger and faster and stronger? Absolutely. He's young. That's why he's going to go number 1. And he's a prospect like we haven't seen, but there's room to grow. So is there a guy maybe a little older, maybe a sophomore, maybe a junior that falls because the freshmen tend to get taken by these teams early so they can build with them? That's going to happen. And every night we get surprised by somebody falling back for whatever reason. And sometimes they're really good, and sometimes they fell back for reasons that become plain and obvious. So we'll see. It will be very interesting come Friday morning. And yes, like you said, we're recording this the night before the draft. Come Friday morning, there's already talk of multiple deals about ready to go down, and free agency doesn't start till July 1st.
Yeah.
You got to get through the draft, and then we got 10 days till free agency begins, and then all these people that have been pontificating where guys could end up, and I'm sure guys have thought about it themselves, the deals start coming, and it's, for NBA fans, it's like Christmas in July. You're getting to see how teams are shaping up, and then we get to see the young guys in Summer League. And before you know it, we'll have the kickoff of college and NFL football, And basketball fans will still be sitting there going, I can't wait for mid-October. But by the way, my favorite team's playing Monday Night Football tonight, so I'm excited for that too. It's a great time of year. Great time of year.
Absolutely. My last question, we kept up with the, champion, Nuggets, toward the top of the Western Conference, during the season and toward the end, just like you talked about earlier, came within a few games in the stretch run. In your opinion, what do the Grizzlies need to do now to take it to the next level of where the Nuggets are, or do you believe a full, healthy Grizzlies are at that level?
I think they're really close. I think they need to grow up from the hardships. Denver, remember, with this group, missed the playoffs 2 years in a row by a single game. Then they became the number 2 seed and got bounced in the first round. Then they made a nice run their fourth year but they had been together before those 2 years where they had ticked up for a couple of years as well. So they were year 6, 7, adding Jamal Murray. They had Gary Harris. They moved him. It's learning from what has held you back. And Denver clearly did that. And Denver last year did not, they didn't have a healthy Jamal Murray. So one for the Grizzlies, it's health. Get your guys back as best you can. Obviously, Brandon's going to be probably longer to get back in the lineup. And hopefully Steven Adams ready to go when training camp starts in October. That's one thing. Mature a little bit and realize you are a target. You're a benchmark victory for young teams. Teams like Orlando, teams like Oklahoma City who had an uptick, teams like New Orleans, teams like Utah, teams like the Lakers, even with LeBron. You're a team when you're playing like that when they beat you, they go in that locker room and say, we just took a really good team and took them out. We can play at this level. You're a benchmark. You're no longer the hunters. You're the hunted. And they seemed to get it last year, but there were nights where you wondered. And then I just think, go back to having fun. Forget about all the nonsense. Forget about all the talk. The game is fun. The way they play is fun. They like it. The coaches like it. Have fun. Quit overthinking it. Quit trying to be everything everybody tells you are and just be who you are, because as we've seen in 2 consecutive years, that's good enough to have home court advantage through everything but the Western Conference Finals. Now you got to get to the Western Conference Finals.
Absolutely. Once again, I'd like to thank my sponsor for the show, Platinum Jewelers. I know they are very good people. You told me that you off air, you've been enjoying your off season, watching your son Austin play baseball.
Mm-hmm. He's fun. He's 11, going to be 12. Got a little bit of a late start. So as I tell my friends, I'm not raising Bryce Harper. He's not the best 11-year-old baseball player I've seen, but he's really working hard and made some big strides. And when guys I trust that know the game and see him play and have seen him grow say, hey, he's taking some real strides, it's fun. We're going to go to a couple camps here, one down in Oxford and Ole Miss, and then one that he got invited to down in Fort Myers, Florida. And that's the one where I had to have the talk like, hey, man, you might walk onto that field and you might be the worst player at that camp, but that's still saying something because you're there. So don't let it affect you. And all you can do is just go play ball and play as hard as you can and soak up every ounce of instruction you get. So I'm very proud of him. He works really hard. At times, I know I push him very hard. In the end, though, I try to make sure every day I tell him I'm proud of him, that I love him. I'm proud of the young man he becomes every day. And, I joke with my friends, I'll say, sometimes I can't stand the kid because he's better looking, he's smarter, he's a better ball player in every sport than I was, and he's nicer than I am. So some days I have to humble him a little bit and say, hey, you know what? I might just ship you off and make another one looks just like you and try to be better than them. But in the end, I wouldn't. There's not enough for me to do that. He's awesome, and every day, I'm very proud of him. His mother and stepfather are very proud of him, and I like the fact that I have, we have a co-parenting system between people that aren't together that I think is a good example of it's not about us, it's about the kid, and we all get along great. And
absolutely,
in doing so, I have a son that I'm very comfortable being around adults with, and I'm very comfortable acting like a child myself with. So I look forward to it. I thank you for asking about him. And when I get to see him wake up in the morning, make his breakfast, I might, grunt and groan because I'm old and I'm tired and sore from doing something. But watching him, go hit and baseball camps or shoot in basketball camps or, run around in football camps and the things that he likes to do, or just sit down and help him with math homework or stuff for the summer and realize that things are starting to click for him. I'm enjoying it because at 17, 18, this ride kind of comes to an end. They go off and become their own adults and head off to college. And so I'm going to enjoy every single second of it in the off season. And it's a great time.
That's awesome, Eric. We'll all be watching with anticipation to see what happens tomorrow night, the draft. And obviously, like you said, free agency starts July 1st. Before we know it, a few months away, October hits the preseason. And then, the 2023-24 season is going to be here. I'm sure I probably will be contacting you, again, to come on to preview the next season for us. So I really appreciate you being always such a nice guy to me and coming on the podcast here. Thank you so much.
It's easy to be nice to you. You're one of my good friends here in the city. I'm glad we did not discuss when you won all those awards, and I was fortunate to get a couple myself. We did not discuss the shenanigans we got into at the party at Minglewood Hall because those are for a different podcast, and calling it people who won awards acting foolishly, but not foolishly enough to get into real trouble. So, hey, look, man, I'm happy to do it. I love talking about this stuff, and I'm so proud of what you're doing with this show. And I love seeing the updates to look, having done this for a living 5 days a week, and you've been on a year, 120 shows, nothing to scoff at. That's like doing a regular everyday talk show, my friends. So I'm proud of you, and I'm always honored to be a guest. And anytime you need me, whether I'm here or, charging up the batteries for the season ahead, if I'm out of town, I've always got time for you. You know that.
Thanks a lot, Eric. I appreciate it, and talk to you soon.
You got it, Michael.
All right. Take care.